Mm-hmm.
I go to 2 weddings in 2 weeks, and that makes me nuptial.
I think so. I think that qualifies.
So basically, I'm all about weddings.
Why not? Are you? Yeah, you are all about weddings. Yes, absolutely.
I've been a best man 20 times, or uh, I was your best man, in fact.
That's right.
Uh, and I've been to 2 weddings. I've been to 3 weddings this year.
Wow.
4 if we count yours last year. That's a lot of weddings.
Be a pretty rough life if you weren't in favor of weddings.
Oh yeah, if I was a typical modern person who finds weddings disgusting and
Yeah.
marriage awful,
Yeah.
yeah, it's true. But no, although to be fair, back when I had 13 or 14 or 15 best manhoods under my belt, a Hungarian individual who should go nameless made the comment that I'd become a sort of matrimonial charon, rowing my closest friends across the Styx, dumping them on the other shore, and pulling out, waving goodbye, and laughing. That's not very nice.
That's that's pretty dead on, actually. Now that he said that, that's really eloquent.
I think, what a cruel thing to say. A matrimonial charon dumping his best friends on the other side and rowing away laughing.
That's whoever that guy is. He is a poet. What a beautiful mind.
Is that how you felt at the end of your wedding? That I was waving goodbye, have a good time, kids. Is that how you felt? Enjoy the honeymoon. Real life is waiting. Is that what you thought? Wow. I had heard. What did I say? Gosh, that's poetry. That's calumny. That's scurrilous, is what it is. Absolutely scurrilous. It's more scurrilous than Atlantis. That's right. All right, all right. Let me ask you a question. Which do you consider more scurrilous, Atlantis or Lemuria?
Lemur. Wait. Yeah, Lemuria.
On what basis do you find Lemuria to be filled with scurrility?
The shape of the con. So it's like the so for those of you who don't know, it's like the Atlantis of the Pacific. But like on maps, this thing looks absolutely huge.
Sure, it
And
was gigantic. But you're saying it's a myth.
I'm saying I abide by modern scholarship, who floats the
Oh,
case on this.
oh yeah. Well, if that's true, there was no such place as Lemuria. Where did the Lemurians on Mount Shasta come from, smart guy?
Liars, cheats, people who
Liars.
are trying to, people who own property in Mount Shasta and want to sell it to suckers.
I, what? What a horrible. What a terrible thing to say. I mean, think of all the think of all the deep religious movements that have really gotten behind Lemuria. The Great I Am, the Theosophists, Rudolf Steiner and the Anthroposophists, the Church Universal and Triumphant. Are you going to tell me all those people were lying or making it up? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, they're all scamming people out of money. They're all just trying to make a buck, Charles.
So basically, you're telling me that all of these different religious groups are selling Mount Shasta like some sort of prize pig.
Yes,
All right,
exactly. Yeah.
okay, I guess maybe I don't know. I just think that to be more enlightened. I mean, look, I have looked at what Wikipedia says about both Lemuria and Atlantis, and they accuse it all of being pseudoscience, pseudo-history, pseudo-archaeology. These are the kind of people that don't believe Eric von Däniken and the ancient astronauts.
Wait, what? The ancient astronauts?
The ancient astronauts, all of our world civilization came to us from ancient astronauts.
I thought there was Ancient Aliens. I thought there's like some sort of
Yeah,
show on the
that's what I'm
History
saying.
Channel.
Yeah, Ancient Alien. Well, that's how you know it's true if it's on the History Channel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're telling me that Ancient Aliens are more true or less true than Atlantis and Lemuria?
I think Ancient Aliens is as false as Lemuria, but I have not heard convincing arguments about Atlantis, and I am more agnostic on Atlantis. I have not closed the book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then let me ask you to explain this. If there is no Lemuria, how did Los Angeles have a secret tunnel city built by the lizard people?
Well, who
Are you going
said?
to say that's a myth?
Cite your sources. Oh wow! This is pseudoscience, pseudo history, pseudo archaeology, right here in action.
No, no, you are about to you're going to regret this. All right, you are really going to regret this. You'd be so sorry.
What you're doing is not academic or scientific. Your methods are quite, to be
Or
quite
unsound.
frank, they are unsound.
Well, he says you. This is for listen carefully to this. This is from the Los Angeles Almanac. Okay? And this, by the way, this is it's quoting the LA Times, so you know it's true. In 1933, mining engineer George Warren Schufeld related stories told to him of Hopi legends describing a race of lizard people who 5,000 years ago built three great underground cities near the Pacific coast, including one beneath Los Angeles. The cities were said to have been built underground as protection against great cataclysmic fires on the surface. He took up the cause of locating the city beneath Los Angeles. He reported that this underground city was laid out in the shape of the revered lizard, extending from its head under northeast Los Angeles to its tail under the downtown Central Library. The ancient builders, more advanced intellectually than modern humans, tunneled through rocks using chemicals and constructed huge domed caverns housing 1,000 families. The underground city was further connected by a series of additional tunnels to the ocean where the ebb and flow of seawater forced air into the labyrinths. How their civilization came to an end was unclear. In 1934, Schufeld, who incidentally developed a device he called a radio X-ray, announced that he had located tunnels in a treasure room containing gold objects beneath Fort Moore Hill in downtown Los Angeles. After acquiring funds to do excavating, Schufeld obtained permission from the authorities, meaning the LA City Council, smart guy, agreeing to split the value of his finds with the county to drill a 350-foot shaft. The work was interrupted by cave-in concerns, however, and by spring ground to a halt when funding and media attention ceased. Shortly thereafter, Schufeld disappeared from public view. Well, I'll tell you something. This taking Schufeld's thing as gospel. Do you know what the center of the lizard city was? Where it really was? The very focus of it all?
I don't know, 200 feet under
The
Criswell's.
cathedral. Are you really going to tell me that mystic emanations coming up from beyond didn't govern the building of the LA Cathedral and made it look like something out of the lizard people city beneath it?
So the LA Almanac.
I saw 5 million years to Earth.
You might if I go to the library in Los Angeles and it's like, hey, what's a good reference book to find information on the city of Los Angeles? They're gonna give me this almanac that
Yes,
has with the lizard
definitely.
people in it.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Definitely. So I'm telling you, the fact is that the city of Los Angeles, now the relationship between the lizard people and the Lemurians is to me unclear, except that they both begin with L. And that's got to stand for something, doesn't it? Lucky?
What's Lemuria named after? I don't understand.
Well, actually, according to these so-called real scientists, It was noticed that in India and Madagascar, you had in both places these odd creatures that are sort of primates called lemurs.
Yeah.
So the idea was that there must have been some sort of a bridge between them geographically, and they called that Lemuria.
Hmm.
But then the people who were more directly in touch with the psychic masters on the higher planes transferred it from the Indian Ocean to the Pacific.
Okay. So, well, I mean, so lizard people, Lemurians, they're both based off animals.
They both
Uh,
begin with L.
so I have a question from your truth bomb that you dropped on us.
Yes, I very good. I dropped the truth bomb. Yes, I did, and I'm proud of it. A
so
lovely truth bomb that begins with L too.
so this guy was drilling down to get into the tunnels. Like he
Yeah,
wanted to drill down
he did.
and to get to the treasure room or something.
Yeah,
So, but then you mentioned that the city council, the LA City Council, was gave its approval or cooperation with that.
they sure did.
What city council was that? What year was this?
1933.
People put their names on this in the city council. Like, you know what? We're gonna allow
Yeah,
this man to drill down 100 feet to get to the Lemurian gold room or the
that's
lizard people
right.
gold. Wow, wow.
But you're saying they're smarter than the LA City Council in 1933.
So 1933. So when was the battle? What year was the Battle of Los Angeles?
That was in 1942, so
Ooh.
9 years later. But let's see. Here are the people that you are calling frauds and morons. Uh, Let me see. Los Angeles City Council, 1933. Uh, let's see. Where is they? I mean, these people were the very best money could buy.
They're probably all white guys.
Well, all right. They were Howard W. Davis, Jim Wilson, Stephen W. Cunningham, Robert L. Burns, Byron B. Brainerd, Earl C. Gay. See, he was interesting. Howard W. Davis was the president of the council. Evan Lewis, George W.C. Baker, E. Snapper Ingram. There's a name for you. Charles Winchester Breedlove. I like that. John W. Baumgartner, Darwin William Tate. That guy was named after Darwin. He knew science. And Franklin P. Beyer. He knew about elections.
Other than Breedlove, I don't know about any of those guys. Those are pretty generic names. Pretty weird.
You're saying they were morons.
In this instance, yes.
You know, it is this spirit of disbelief and incredulity that is destroying America's young people.
That's debatable.
How can you look a 4-year-old in the face and say to her, you don't believe in the city of the lizard people? How could you do that?
I know, I'm a monster.
Yeah, pretty much, I would say. You know, where does this end? I mean, next you'll be saying there's such a thing as women that can be defined.
Oh.
What?
That's a low blow, Charles.
Well, I don't know. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're a little bit discombobulated here in the wonderful world of the Tumbler House Tower, just because everything has gotten so crazy on the outside this week.
That's right.
I think you should have lowered the drawbridge or raised it or something.
No way, man. Better safe than sorry. Hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Well, actually, that's really good advice, to tell you the truth. That's what Officer Clancy always did before
That's
he became the
right.
chief of police. And look what happened to him. You know, now there's a question. Now that he's the chief of Arcadia, the Arcadia PD,
Yeah.
does that put him in a special relationship with City Hall?
Yes, it does.
Mr. Mayor, it'd be a terrible thing if something were to happen to you.
Well, I don't know if that's the ideal approach. You catch more flies with honey. You know,
Well, Your
you
Honor, that's a beautiful car you've got. I'll make sure we've got folks to check it out to make sure there's no mechanical difficulties, as you might say.
I mean, it's like drug busts, right? I mean, you want to clean up the city. You want to clean up, get drugs out of the city.
Well,
Raids are, yeah.
it was interesting you mentioned that because our city councilman Newhall there in Arcadia, he was just drug busted. They found drugs in his car.
Wow, felony
Yeah.
quantity.
What's that?
Felony quantity? Like, is he selling or what? Just like he's
Well, no,
using.
it's just that he had raised questions as to Clancy's competence
Oh,
as chief of police, and wouldn't you know it, it turned out that he was at the center of a $1 million drug bust.
well, I mean,
Not a
clearly,
week later.
clearly, he was scared. Because he knows Clancy's an honest cop and he's on the hunt, and he's like,
That's
"Oh
sure.
no, they're gonna get me!" And guess what? He got.
Exactly. And there's a lesson in that for all of us, ladies and gentlemen. You mind your P's and Q's and you're in Arcadia, California. You're going to go the way Councilman Newhall did. Because justice in Arcadia knows no class, no boundaries. Justice will be served on a plate. Big heaping spoonfuls of justice. Yeah, and we're all in line to get some of that justice.
Mm.
Fill up your plates with justice, ladies and gentlemen. Stand in line.
All right, let's leverage this into the memes of production.
I thought we didn't have any.
Oh, well, we have some comments. We're gonna do some comments.
All right, what do we got?
We've got one from Don from Florida by way of the Bronx. He says,
very good.
"Word is poor old Rose has been working around the clock cleaning up all the cocoon remnants from the estivation. All she does is roam the halls with her vacuum and duster, shaking her head in confusion."
Well, that's not a surprise. You notice that she's got little strands of cocoon silk in her hair. I'm not surprised she's confused. I wonder where it came from. Yeah, well.
Connor says, "Forget whatever notions I had about a great summer. I now dream of a Californian summer. Just imagining going on a picnic with my family in our summer finest. Then the family next to you gets beamed up suddenly, and you embrace your family, because now you truly understand that, as the poor abducted family next to you now understands, the good times don't last forever, and every moment is precious."
That's very, very true. And those good times that do last forever generally mean you've been stuffed and waxed.
Little creepy. All right, moving on. Another comment from Tampa tobacconist who has a bone to pick with you, Charles. So
Arr.
he says, "I enjoyed Charles's recent discussion of American comfort food, but I have it on good authority that there has been grumbling and mumbling on the 13th floor because of Charles's startling omission of Chicago-style hot dogs. That these magnificent meats, these fantastic franks, these genuine bovine delights were omitted is all the more upsetting since their supplier, Vienna Beef, was founded by immigrants from Austria-Hungary. Can Charles please right this wrong? Perhaps by telling us about his favorite European sausages, or by being forced to sing the Oscar Mayer Wiener song in atonement."
Well, firstly, let me point out that Chicago hot dogs are generally served without ketchup.
So
I want that to hang in the air. Well, a lot of people love ketchup with the hot dogs.
I don't like ketchup on hot dogs.
Well, then you love Chicago-style hot dogs. They don't have ketchup. The
Good.
second thing you should bear in mind is that as far as sausages go, my favorite sausage, in truth, and I don't want anybody to get all disgusted, it's boudin, blood sausage.
Is that a UK thing?
No, it's French.
Oh.
And French Canadian.
Oh, I'm thinking blood pudding. I'm thinking
blood pudding is very similar to boudin, to be honest with you.
Oh, interesting.
Now, interestingly, also in the Cajun country, What they call boudin is not made with blood. It's because the state of Louisiana forbade them to use it in the 20s. So they just did everything else and just didn't put the blood in. So they have this sort of whitish, very delicious, but not with that. And now, which is sort of repetitious to the non-Cajun ear, if you're French, they call boudin made the original way blood boudin, which is kind of like saying blood sausage.
Hmm.
Anyway, but nevertheless, although I've said that, you will get your musical treat. You ready?
Ready.
Oh, I wish I was an Oscar Mayer wiener. That is what I truly want to be. 'Cause if I was an Oscar Mayer wiener, everyone would be in love with me.
Nice.
Now notice Oscar Mayer wiener, not a weenie.
Mm. Yeah.
People say weenies when they mean wieners, but we all know that a real weenie is typical of the people that run the show in most countries today.
That's right.
Weenies.
Yeah, we live in Weenie Central.
Oh God, yes, indeed. Anyway, moving along.
All right, moving along.
No state of the week.
We'll get to that. We have one more item before State of the Week.
Okay.
A person with the moniker "Too Young to Be a Curmudgeon" says, "Dear Mr. Franchini and
Don't you believe that, kid? I was a curmudgeon at age 8. You can do it whenever you want, but go ahead.
okay." They say, "Dear Mr. Coulombe and Mr. Franchini, first off, it was a great pleasure to meet Mr. Coulombe when he was back at home in July and paid a visit to my church. He was so gracious as to invite me to tour the Tumbler House Tower, and I know he would have introduced us to Mr. Franchini were the boss not just then away on a very important business trip. Indeed. The staff there had nothing but the highest praises to sing for him."
I'll say.
I'm sure. See, everybody,
Yeah, everyone knows that everyone values their job.
our
You bet.
approval rate is immaculate. All right. Anyhow, I was also pleasantly surprised by the gift shop. Unlike many gift shops filled with cheap and cliche stationery, this one had things you actually need and can put to use right away. And
That's for sure.
and having always been what you might call an Officer Clancy skeptic, I was delighted to meet the legend in person as he was just coming away from dealing with a mob of looters in the style of Christ saving the woman who was to be stoned. He spoke with moving grief about how unfortunate it was that the abandoned loot was quite damaged and could not therefore be returned. But like the good public servant he is, well deserving of his recent promotion, he wasted no time in cleaning things up. Secondly, I may travel this autumn to Boston. May Charles give us his advice as to where and how one might spend a week or two in that area? It'd be much appreciated.
Well, I'm happy to. Firstly, it was great showing you around the tower, and I don't know if you remember going up to see the meditation garden, but that was quite something. And then I remember it was very odd. The elevator stopped on the 13th floor, and the door opened, and then sorry, what were we talking about?
You were going over the trip, the recent trip. You're showing them around Tumbler House.
Oh, yeah, right. So he ooted out at the gift shop. Then he wanted to see the meditation garden. So we got into the elevator, pushed the button, up we go, stopped at the 13th floor. The door opened, and then I'm sorry, what were we talking about?
He was asking you about Boston. Can you give some advice on where a person might spend a week or two in that area?
Indeed, I could, and in fact, I shall. Boston and its environs are amongst my favorite places in the United States of America, despite the unfortunate history around the Revolution. Nevertheless, the revolutionary sites are amongst the things one wants to see. So, first thing you want to remember when you go to Boston is the so-called Freedom Trail. You start in the beautiful, beautiful first public park in the United States, Boston Common. You follow the Freedom Trail, you see Park Street Church, you come by, amongst other things, King's Chapel, which is probably my favorite non-Catholic church in the United States. Because King's Chapel started life as the Anglican chapel of the royal governor, hence the name King's Chapel, the chapel of the king. And they still have the royal governor's pew with the canopy and all that. So I like that, monarchist that I am. Just outside is a martyr, a Catholic martyr, the Chevalier de Saint-Sauveur, the Knight of the Holy Savior, illegitimate son of Louis XV, who was killed during the Revolution when the French fleet came to back up the rebels against the king. And one of the things they had to do was offer mass for the French troops. But Calvinist Boston didn't like this idea. Even more so, they didn't like the procession with the Blessed Sacrament that went from the ship to King's Chapel, which had a sort of altar and all that, so they could offer mass on it every day. And one day the mob attacked the procession. The Chevalier successfully saved the Blessed Sacrament from the mob, but was killed in doing so, and they buried him right in front of King's Chapel. And the interesting thing is that the obelisk on top of him doesn't tell you why or how he died. It just expresses the wish that this sort of thing would never happen again. And the third reason I think it's really amazing is because it is the first Unitarian church in America. Now, most Unitarian churches, if not all, came out of in America anyway, came out of a split in the Congregational Church. When they got over Calvinism, they just went the other way and threw everything out with the bathwater. But King's Chapel, after the Revolution, what was left of the congregation, voted in not a priest, but a reader, an Episcopal reader, an Anglican reader, as their pastor. He was infected with Unitarianism, and so in 1785 they had a referendum on the Trinity, and the Trinity lost. So they took their pens and their books of common prayer, and they crossed out all the references to the Trinity, the way they had crossed out the references to the King a few years earlier. And so, to this day, King's Chapel describes itself as a church that is Anglican in liturgy, Congregational in polity, and Unitarian in theology. And only in Boston could you say that with a straight face. But wait, there's more. Nearby is, apart from the Parker House, where chocolate chip cookies were invented. Parker House cookies. Actually, it's Parker House rolls. The chocolate chip cookies came from the Toll House, which is another restaurant in the hinterland. But anyhow, Parker House rolls were invented in the Parker House. So you will come to the old State House. And the old State House was the center of the colony. You see the lion and the unicorn there, and it's where both the accession of King George III and the Declaration of Independence were read from the terrace. You keep going, you'll come to Faneuil Hall Marketplace, which is a great spot, although my beloved Durgan Park restaurant there closed down a few years ago. You cross the Charles River, you come into Charlestown, you come to the Bunker Hill Monument and the Bunker Hill Museum. Also, the USS Constitution, Old Ironsides, is on the trip. There are a lot of other things, though, not just colonial stuff. Oh, and I forgot the Old North Church, Episcopal Church, one if by land, two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be. You have our old friend Paul Revere, and you have Paul Revere's house in the North End, which is also on the tour. The Catholic Cathedral, where the Latin Mass is offered, is Holy Cross. Unfortunately, the Church of the Holy Trinity was shut down a few years ago, which is one of my favorites, the Catholic Church of the Holy Trinity. If you're a big Anglo-Catholic fan, there are two churches in the Boston area that are worth seeing. One is the Church of the Advent on Beacon Hill. Beacon Hill is where you could see actually several relatives of our beloved Vinnie Franchini. Uh, Aunt Helen lives there. Aunt Helen Slingsby, and cousin Nancy Ellicott lives there.
Charles, these people don't exist.
What about cousin Harriet?
She especially doesn't exist.
Okay, well, anyway, they don't exist, but if they did, they'd be close relatives of Vinnie's. What? What? Well, they would if they. All right, forget it.
Okay, sure.
Anyway, so that's amongst the very few of the things you have to see in Boston itself. Go a little bit further out into Cambridge, Mass, and you'll run into Harvard University, which is worth seeing. You'll also see well, how do I put it? You'll see the Unitarian Church, the Congo Church, and the Episcopal Church in Cambridge, all of which are colonial era. And then the world it gets wild. You get out to Lexington and Concord. Lexington, they've got the Lexington battlefield, Lexington Common, where the shot heard around the world at the beginning of the Revolution. There, and Concord Bridge. In Concord, also, you'll see the houses of Louisa May Alcott, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and people like that. Now, let's say you wanted to go. Oh, and in Concord, I also should point out, is the Colonial Inn, which goes back to colonial times. It's a great place to eat. Go down to Sudbury, and you'll come to one of my personal favorite places in the whole wide world, which is the Wayside Inn, made famous by Longfellow, which I really love the Wayside Inn. And let me see. If you went south, you'd come to Plymouth Plantation, which is a reenactment place for the Pilgrims. They have the Mayflower docked in Plymouth, the Mayflower 2, which is also a reproduction, and Plymouth Rock, where the Pilgrims landed. Go north, go the opposite direction, you'll come to Marblehead and Salem. And if you're really into witches, well, Salem is your place. And by witches, I don't mean IHM nuns, despite the resemblance. I mean the IHMs of my time, not the ones I have now. But the Salem Witch Museum is pretty bizarre, but worth seeing. If you find yourself in Salem, the Nathaniel Hawthorne Inn is probably the best place to go. And you'll also see the House of the Seven Gables, which, again, if you're a Hawthorne fan, this is fun stuff. I'm a Hawthorne fan, so I like anything to do with him. Let me see. So yeah, you see all that in a week, and you'll have seen quite a bit.
All right, Charles, thank you for that. All right, time for State of the Week.
Oh boy, it's not Massachusetts, is it? Ha ha ha.
No, not
No.
Massachusetts.
Okay.
Let's do Wyoming this week.
Why not? Wyoming. Well, I'll tell you. The biggest thing anybody knows about Wyoming, and they are correct to know it, is Yellowstone National Park, way up in the northwestern corner. Yellowstone is really amazing. It's Old Faithful, the guys, the Devil's Paint Pots, to say nothing of the wildlife that you'll see running around there. But there is more than just Yellowstone. There are a lot of natural wonders throughout Wyoming, but in terms of built heritage, there's the town of Buffalo, Wyoming, whose old hotel, I think it's called the Grand Hotel or something, but it was visited by Teddy Roosevelt and a bunch of other people, and is really a worthwhile little town. Casper, Wyoming, in the center of the state, was at one point considered as the state capital. It didn't get it, but it does have a pretty Catholic church and some lovely buildings. The state capital, Cheyenne, is catty corner, as it were, from Yellowstone. It's down toward the southeastern corner of the state. And Cheyenne's a pretty town. Again, it's worth seeing. Most of Wyoming, there are Indian reservations, there are a lot of ranches. It's still very wild country. And if you want a taste of the Old West brought forward to the present, Wyoming's your cup of tea. If you want a lot of old colonial stuff, you're not going to find it in Wyoming, but you will find the spirit of the Old West living on, and it's really quite a nice place. A lot of, again, Indian reservations and the parks and everything else. So that's what you want when you go to Wyoming.
Wow, 10 minutes for the single city of Boston, 2 minutes for the whole state of Wyoming. What a sad day. I'm sorry to all you Wyoming residents out there.
They would say the same thing. I mean, what do you want me? What do you want me to do? Fishing, hunting, camping. It's ranching.
uh,
It's not a very settled state.
okay, fair enough.
Its wonders are mostly you don't you don't go to Wyoming to soak up historic architecture. They have a bit of it in Cheyenne, a little bit of it in Casper, and
Yeah.
as I say, Buffalo, Wyoming. There are other places like that, but it's primarily a place for soaking up, as I say, the Old West and nature.
Yeah. Know any good fishing spots?
No, I don't. I haven't fished since I was a boy. I've seen people doing it, but I don't know if it's any good.
uh,
The No, I mean, and people, it's a funny thing. Fewer and fewer people fish or hunt today,
uh, yeah.
and you know why?
Probably because they can't handle the peace and quiet and silence and reflect on their lives because there's too much horror. All right.
And they would have to leave their computers,
That too.
and they'd have to leave their computer porn.
That reminds me of a time I was out. I was up in the mountains in Azusa Canyon, and at the time I had gotten the gold bug. I was doing some gold prospecting, and these people, these young teenagers, I'll never forget it. I was watching them because I was like in Little Creek. I had my little sluice box that was filtering for gold, and they were just like completely wandering around lost. But eventually became apparent to me that the entire point of their going into nature was to take photos posted on social media so they could brag that they went into this spot. And then that was it. And then they went back to their car, and then they left. They just sort of like went, and then they wandered around a little bit, mostly just to take photos. And then I just, that was so the antithesis of me, that I just, I'll never forget that. Like, how could you just, you're going into nature, and you're not even beholding the glory of God's creation. You're not even absorbing like anything that's around you. You're still so self-absorbed by your phone and your camera. It just
Well,
was so shocking to me.
well, the test is always what they're taking pictures of, the thing or
Yeah,
themselves
and they took
at
they
the
were
thing.
taking selfies. They were
Well,
taking selfies. Um,
I just went out on my way to the wedding that I went to, as I spoke of. Stopped at a place called the Grüne. I've got to tell you, the scenery in the part of Austria I went into was just incredible.
hmm,
Tree-covered canyons, and huge, huge mountains, fog everywhere. And you understand that after 3 weeks of bloody heat here,
hmm,
getting up there into the cool 60-degree temperature, misty. Oh man, it was like going to Carmel. It was just great getting away from the heat, and then the cool followed us because the heat wave's broken.
hmm.
So I'm really happy about that. Anyway, no, well, I mean, I'm sorry I can't tell you more about Wyoming. I mean, it's just that Wyoming. You gotta bear in mind that one of my great interests, of course, is colonial history, and Wyoming is very thin on that
Yeah.
because uh, what settlement there's been was strictly under the American aegis.
Hmm.
Trappers would come, but they didn't leave any permanent settlements in Wyoming. Um I mean, it's the Indian reservations are fascinating, the Wind River and all that. Um, was all interesting, wonderful stuff. But in terms of history, there's just not that much there.
That makes
Not,
sense.
hmm?
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right.
Plus, of course, they've got there is some belief that close to Yellowstone was a Lemurian temple.
Yeah. Very good. All right. Question from Innocent Smith. Mr. Coulombe, what was MK Ultra, and is it worth knowing much about to understand the psychological warfare tactics our lords and masters use today?
Well, MK Ultra was a project of the CIA between 58 and 78, which starting in about 67 was progressively scaled back until it was abolished. But basically, the CIA experimented with LSD and other drugs on American citizens without their permission or knowledge. It was not a good thing. Now, was it? You see, the problem you always enter into is that anytime the government does something like that, it inevitably breeds more. Any kind of government secrecy will breed even more theories about that secrecy. You know,
Wait,
or to
we'll
put
breed more? Are you saying they'll do more, or
no,
they'll
no, no.
be
I mean, how do I put this?
people's
When a
imaginations will expand on it?
precisely now you get to a problem when government behave like that you can't tell the difference. I mean, unless you really are in a position to know, and I'm not. You're not in a position to know what's real and what's Memorex. Beyond a
Mm,
certain point. What is the government not telling us? Well, we know there's a lot of stuff they haven't told us. Um, Something like MK Ultra, which of course they denied up until it was ended and they were forced to talk about it. Uh, let's just say that does not contribute to your faith in your government, and it does not dispel conspiracy theories.
mm,
By acting according to the way a conspiracy theorist believes you would act, you're not proving him wrong.
yeah. Well, the one thing the government it shows you what the government is like, how Republican and Democrats completely united on Julian Assange
Yeah,
and his. I don't really know or care about his politics, but I do care about his mission for greater transparency in what is going on. And he scared the hell out of the entire government.
he sure did.
Everybody was looking over their shoulder,
Well,
you
and
know?
that, the problem you have with citizens is the problem you have is that government will always have things it has to conceal from the majority of its citizens. But the problem with that, especially if you claim to be a democracy, is that you have to. How do you justify that, philosophically speaking? I mean, it's one thing. It's one thing if you're a monarchy, and you can say, well, the king is determined that this is the way it ought to be, and then it's up to him to decide if the security of the realm requires secrecy. But if you're going to say that you're a democracy and that you're answerable to the citizens, you are nevertheless forced to conceal things from them, because what if the enemy found out? But how do you justify that in terms of democracy? You can't.
Yeah.
You run into some really difficult problems. Um, and then you get to the point, if you do this, if you do a lot of this stuff, you get to the point to where they're not going to believe you anyway. It's like Area 51.
Well, I mean, I was thinking, I mean, I think your point is right. There are legitimate areas that should be top secret. Um, but I feel like what he was uncovering, because see, they don't release, WikiLeaks wasn't releasing everything. It was, at least I don't think so. It was corruption. It was scandal. It was,
No, but those corruptions and scandals are usually covered up in the name of national security. So the question is, who determines what is and what isn't? It's a very difficult. It's a very difficult area, and I mean, also notice that intelligence operations dealing with, whatever enemies we are supposed to have, intelligence always relies upon corruption.
hmm,
They always used to say that intelligence depended upon the two H's, heroin and homos.
really.
Well, yeah, because how do you get mid to even high-ranking officials of another country to do your spying for you? Well, you through blackmail, basically, and that's just how it was always done, and that's how it's proceeded.
Well,
Um,
in this age, how would that work? Because I don't feel like either would be a scandal anymore.
well, it might make things difficult, I guess, but traditionally, well, I mean, the great paradigm was the Redl affair before World War II or World War One. The deputy chief of Austrian intelligence was a Captain Redl, who was married but had gender issues. So he was seduced by a Czech photographer fellow who was in the pay of the Russian intelligence, and he turned over he got a lot of information out of Redl, which he was once the when the Levins stopped, the blackmail began, and he was able to compel Redl to turn over a bunch of stuff that Russia used in the First World War. And the Austrians were never able to figure out the exact extent of what Redl had turned over to the Russians. Now, mind you, when it was discovered, Redl killed himself. So they didn't know what the Russians knew, and this would have terrible repercussions for Austria in the First World War.
Hmm.
So I mean, and it's not as though the vast majority, if not every intelligence service in the world, uses stuff like that if they can.
I see.
In other words, I would not be surprised to find that Austrian intelligence, if they could have pulled something off like that with the Russians, would have done so.
Hmm. All right. Question from Cal. He says, "Hello, Vincent and Charles. My question today pertains to the Sons of Liberty from the American Revolution. Being raised with the American civic religion, I was taught that the Sons of Liberty were courageous freedom fighters attempting to throw off the yoke of the British monarchy. Now, understanding that Americanism is a condemned heresy and the anti-Catholic sentiments of early America, I suspect that there is a deeper backstory to the Sons of Liberty than what I had been originally taught. Could Charles please give a brief summary of the organization's founding, ideology, and modus operandi? Furthermore, should a Catholic view them as indispensable to the founding of our country, or something more akin to an 18th century Antifa?"
Well, firstly, you're right. They were something of an 18th century Antifa. They were started in Massachusetts by people like John Hancock and so forth, and they were originally used to discourage and to intimidate supporters of the government. Now, let's put this in a little bit of context, shall we? Let's say that you're living in, I don't know, the United States, and you're loyal to the government in Washington, to the Constitution. It's the government you've lived under. Maybe you're a veteran, maybe your father was a veteran. You're an American. And, that's it. But then a group decide that they are going to they're going to change the government or they're going to take their state out of the union. And they set up a new government and they require everyone to take an oath of allegiance to it. And if you don't, then your house could be burned or attacked, your business could be shut down, or you could be literally tarred and feathered, if not killed. And let's remember that being tarred and feathered, we use it all the time as kind of a joke, but it was no joke. You'd have hot tar poured all over you. You're stripped naked. You have steaming hot tar burned in your hair, your face, all over your body. And then you have these feathers stuck on you. And then you're put on a rail. Now remember, you're naked. And if you're a man, stop and think about this for a second. A rail, yay thick. You're sitting on it. Think of what that will do to your genitalia. And they ride you out of town. Now that was what the Sons of Liberty would do with suspected loyalists. And this was before there was even an outbreak of fighting at Lexington and Concord. If you go to Cambridge, Massachusetts today, there's a street called Brattle Street, and it's lined with these beautiful houses. They were all built before the Revolution, and that section of Brattle Street is called Tory Row. The reason is that one night in 1774, the Sons of Liberty, a secret society founded by, as I say, Hancock and people like that, chased them out of their homes, and they had to flee Cambridge and go into Boston. This, they wouldn't swear allegiance to the Congress, and so they were punished. They were friends of government, and that's what they were called, friends of government. And they were treated in that fashion. I had a very strange experience some years ago. There was a house on Brattle Street called now it's called the Longfellow National Monument because the poet Longfellow lived there. It was a beautiful house. But during the siege of Boston by the rebels, Washington had his headquarters in that house. But it was built by Colonel and Mrs. Vassall. So Colonel and Mrs. Vassall built this house, and they were chased out of it in 1774. And eventually they had to go to England. Now, mind you, they're native-born Americans. So they go to England. Well, years and years later, I'm in England. I'm in London, staying in Allen House, which is the Catholic seminary in Chelsea, part of London. Across the Thames is a section called Battersea, and they have a church called St. Mary's Battersea, Anglican church. And it was a place where the poet William Blake was married, which is why I wanted to see it. So I cross the bridge across the Thames. I find the church, and the sweet Anglican church lady says to me, "Oh, I suppose you're here for the American connection." And I said, I had no idea there was an American connection. She says, "Oh, yes. Well, it's where Benedict Arnold is entombed. And they have a window to him in the church, which is kind of interesting to look at." But as I wandered around looking at the graves, I noticed a lot of old Boston names. And there I found the graves of Colonel and Mrs. Vassall, whose house on Brattle Street I had stood in years before. So there they died 3,000 miles away from the home that they worked so hard to build and did so well with that it's still there today. Chased out of their homes by the Sons of Liberty. And it really hit me very, very hard, And then I realized that Battersea had been a place where the American refugees in London settled. See, we forget that. We forget that 100,000 Americans or more had to leave because of the revolution. And they went to Canada and the Bahamas and Sierra Leone if they were black, or they went to England or other parts of the empire. Some of the brightest and best the colonies had ever produced were lost to the new country. Although a lot of loyalists did stay behind, most notably the families of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton and her husband. They're both Loyalist families. But no, when you reflect on the treatment that the Loyalists got, it was pretty miserable. And again, their crime was simply holding on to the same government that they had known all their lives. That was their sin. John Adams, who cannot be accused of maximizing Loyalist numbers, said that when the war broke out, a third were against independence, a third were in favor of it, a third were indifferent. Well, even taking that, only a third of Americans were keen on fighting the war. So please don't talk to me about democracy and the representation of the governed. Our revolution, like everyone else's, was a revolution from the top by the dominant oligarchy in each of the colonies, done to some degree in concert with the Whig oligarchy in England, and eventually backed up by the French and Spanish, which is why it succeeded. And that, incidentally, is why our first Civil War was won by the rebels, and our second Civil War was lost by rebels, because they did not have foreign intervention.
Hmm.
Now, having
Okay.
said that, does that mean I think that the United States are a terrible nation, born in genocide and built on slavery? No. That's the flip side of American exceptionalism. That's the wokeries, the universalism, the Unitarianism, you might say, to American exceptionalism's Calvinism, the flip. No, no, no. The United States are the country where I was born, where my family on my father's side have been for, in my case now, 4 generations. My mother's side, well, 1 generation for her dad and a lot more than 8 for her mother. But this is my country, and I love it more than life itself. But not because its institutions or its ideology are the last best hope of mankind, the shining city on the hill. Just because the United States are my country. And the best way for a Catholic American to show his love for his country is not to jump up and down about how wonderful she is, though he should try to make her that way, but it's to try to convert her. Same for a Catholic Indian or a Catholic Japanese. That's how you show your love of country when your country's pagan. It's the same for our ancestors in the Roman Empire. The Roman emperor had no more loyal subjects, even when he was persecuting them, than his Christian subjects. And through that loyalty, in the end, they converted the whole empire. Would that we, their successors, showed the same love of country that they did.
Right. Right. We have a question from Edward who says, "My father is passing quite suddenly. I was wondering if Charles has any advice and maybe some customs and/or traditions for the family to share. If you could keep him in your prayers as well. His name is Roderick."
Well, let's say a Hail Mary for Roderick.
Okay.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord.
And let perpetual light shine upon him.
May his soul and souls of all the faithful departed, to the mercy of God, rest in peace.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Well, firstly, Edward, deepest condolences on your father. Speaking from experience, I can tell you, as Vinny can, especially if you're a man, the death of your father is probably one of the most searing pains you can go through. It's not fun. But as far as customs go, there are quite a number. The most consoling one for me was wearing the mourning band for a year, the black band on the left arm. That that required my saying constantly when people would ask, "What's the band for?" My father died. Oh, I'm sorry. What's the band for? My father died. I'm sorry. And the funny thing about it, you wonder when, like, your postman's mother dies, and you hear about it, and you say, and you never know her, and you barely know him, and you say, "I'm sorry to hear about your mother." You wonder if it makes a difference. Well, having been on the receiving end now, it does. The most casual condolence really does help. It really does. And the thing you have to bear in mind is that, horrible as it is at the moment, it gets better. It takes time. But it'll be better next week. It'll be better next month. It'll be better than that in a year. It'll be better than that in 2 years. And eventually the pain becomes a part of who you are. But that's the great thing, as I say, about the mourning band. You get used to saying it over and over again. In the immediate, a black mourning wreath on the door is a nice thing if you can get one. Very funny thing happened when my mother and my brother and I took my father back to Massachusetts to bury him. While we were there, we stopped to see our old house in Westchester County. We don't know the people who live there now or lived there then, but there was a funeral wreath on the door. So apparently someone had died. It was an odd feeling when we saw that thing. The wake, of course, is something you do after the rosary. And wakes vary a great deal depending upon your nationality and your family custom. But that is the time when you want the eulogies, not during the Mass. That's when you get your friends together and you remember him, and talk about how great he was. That's the time to do it, is at the wake. And some nationalities drink heavily, some eat heavily. The French Canadians tend to joke a lot. We did in my dad's wake, much to the shock of one of my Anglo classmates from school, who was he couldn't believe that we were laughing and joking. And I said, well, you got to bear in mind that in our culture, we talk about death a lot. And so when it comes, we make fun. I said, my father is dead and my heart is broken. But I know that if he were here, he'd be telling funnier jokes than I ever could. So every nationality, every culture deals with it differently. The Irish love to drink. I don't know what the Lemurians do.
Who knows?
Would you like to think about that a while? Maybe explore it a little?
Let us not explore. Let us not dive down that rabbit hole. Let us not engage.
No, that's fine. Be that way. But the other thing you want to bear in mind, too, is that a month after the funeral, you can have what's called the month's mind mass. And there's the year's mind, and the 7 years mind. And these are all anniversary requiem masses for your father. And, remember him every All Souls Day. If you have a family plot and you live anywhere near it, go there on All Souls. It's a very important thing to do, to pray for the dead. And it's also consoling for you. If you can, have the Gregorian Masses said. Those are 30 Masses said for a given dead person. The name comes from the fact that St. Gregory the First had a vision of his predecessor as Pope, explaining to him that he would be sprung from purgatory if 30 Masses were offered for his soul. So, do that. Now, in some older churches, you'll have what are called privileged altars. And Mass is said for the dead at those altars have particular graces for the deceased among them. Also, you might want to look into various other devotions for the dead, the daily pilgrimage to purgatory, and things like that. All of which you could say. Um, and one of the things I can tell you from experience is that the older you get, the more loved ones you'll have who are gone. Be sure to put the holy card from your father's funeral into your missal, so that whenever you go to mass, you remember him, and do that with anybody else you like, whose funerals you go to. I mean, my missals are just stuffed with holy cards from funerals now. That's the price you pay for living long enough. Um, had another friend die this week. It never ends. The older you get, it's just the way it is. We have not here an abiding city. Um, if we did, it would be intolerable. Uh, one of the things that makes life livable is the fact that it does change. If we were frozen where we are right now in place with never a way forward, we would hate it. So take with the good with the bad. And please God, Edward, you and your father Roderick will meet in paradise. As may we all.
Hmm. All right. Um, We're gonna do one more episode or one more question for this episode. It's from Tampa Tobacconist,
Okay.
and he says, um, in studying the lives of the saints, it seems that saints often met and interacted with other saints, such as Saint John of the Cross, serving as Saint Teresa of Avila's spiritual director. Likewise, I have heard about lay and religious people who have flocked to Padre Pio while he was still living and were touched in a profound way. It seems like towards the end of his life, Padre Pio had become renowned for his holiness and mystical gifts. I have often wished I could have been alive to meet Padre Pio, perhaps attending Mass or receiving confession from him. Given Sir Charles's wide and varied travels, I would like to ask whether he has ever encountered similar men or women he considers living saints. Is there anyone still living whom he could publicly name that he would consider a living saint?
No. And I have to say, I probably would not recognize such a person if I fell over him or her. I've known people who I consider to be very devout, very pious, but I've certainly never known anyone who was given to the miraculous, that I can think of. Or if strange things happened, they were usually quite as surprised by them as anyone else, which is not the hallmark of a very intensely holy person. I certainly also knew or met one and knew the other, two men who had met Padre Pio. Um, but I've known people who have claimed to have visions, which I can neither affirm or deny. I mean, I don't have the discernment of spirits, and I'm not sufficiently holy myself, to be honest with you, to see that in others. I knew Cardinal McIntyre very well. He was my confessor, and I suppose if I had to nominate somebody, it would be he. But I also know him well enough to know that he'd be the first one to deny it. But of course, you could turn that around and say that's exactly what a saint would do. This is, I mean, if you had known Saint Jerome and Saint Augustine when they were going after each other and writing nasty notes, I think if that was all you knew of them, you'd be hard put to consider either of them a saint. And yet, of course, they both were.
Okay, I'm going to press you a little bit on this because I think I know where Tampa Tobacconist is coming from, and I kind of feel the same way. So That's fair. Okay. No living Satanay, to your knowledge, or that you would consider, totally fine. What? But and Saint Jerome, Saint Augustine. Okay, I can understand that. I feel like of all the saints, Padre Pio is right. Is what's the word? Most conspicuous. Like he
No,
has, there's qualities there that are I mean, like, who knows how many, like, his dedication to the sacrament of reconciliation,
no,
you know,
the Courrier d'Art was like that.
and we haven't, and obviously the stigmata.
Yeah,
So it's
I
so
mean,
I guess
such people exist. I've just never met anyone like that.
right. So I guess I'm leading into my question. If you lived in Italy during Padre Pio, and well, I guess it's not a fair question, but it's like, would you consider him, like, do you think you would have recognized him as a living saint if you saw him, or no?
Uh, if he performed objective miracles, and he did, then you're stuck with that. Would I be uh, would I be skeptical to start with? Oh yeah, but the church always is. That's why he got such abuse. Remember, he was silenced for a while. Um, Saint Andre Bessette, my great grandmother knew. He did miraculous stuff, and we have her letters talking whenever she was put out with her adult children in New Bedford. She'd go back to Montreal and get consolation from Saint Andre Bessette. She didn't know he was a saint. She knew he was a holy man who really was into the faith, and he was her great guide and consoler. The fact that I have never personally known someone like that, other than maybe Cardinal McIntyre, it just points to my lack of experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't really tell us anything else. And I simply do not trust my own instincts in this area.
Okay. All right, that'll do it for the show. I hope you
Wait a
guys.
minute.
What?
Do you think there were any Lemurian saints?
No,
Do you think any of the Sons of Liberty were Lemurians?
I don't think they would self-identify as Lemurians. No.
All right, what about Lemurian funeral customs?
What about them?
Anything to say about them?
No, do you?
No. What about Lemurians in Boston?
I'm against them.
What about the Lemurian Freedom Trail?
Sure. Start a Kickstarter and I'll put in $5 for it.
Was Paul Revere a Lemurian?
In secret, possibly.
One if by land, Uzgluk by sea? No, seriously, folks. We're a little short tonight, but bear with us. Life is difficult, and we're actually doing this on the Sunday rather than Saturday, so we're a little pressed.
Yeah.
But we're here for you. I suppose I might as well reveal the terrible truth, if I haven't already. In a week and a half, I'll be going into Ukraine. Just be there a little over a week, but it's a sort of a fact-finding tour, and obviously I'll when I get back, presuming I get back in one piece, which I don't plan to go to the front, ladies and gentlemen. So you needn't be too worried. Although I wouldn't mind your prayers either. You never know what can happen. But no, I'll make a full report when I get back. It's ladies and gentlemen, just my last thought about that. The Ukrainian thing is such a dreadful, awful situation because how do I put this? Everybody wants to make it black and white. Good guys versus bad guys, and what they tend to fight each other over is which are the good guys, which are the bad guys. Well, I'm not going to do that, but what I will tell you is that certainly Ukrainians are fighting and dying, and their civilians are suffering. Presumably, Russians are also fighting and dying, and their civilians are suffering to a greater or lesser degree, from less than the Ukrainians, of course, because the fighting isn't there. But certainly, it's not a fun time for anybody. And if you multiply that by what's going on in the West, with our weaponized wokery dominating everything, it's just not a very, very pleasant time right now in so many ways. And then, of course, if you bring in the current leadership in the church and their war on tradition, uh, you feel like exploding. And that's why I think that Vinny's idea of moving to Lemuria does bear some merit. Going into a whole other dimension as refugees.
Yes, so if you want to donate to the Lemuria Fund,
The Lemurian Refugee Fund. Only this is Earth refugees going to Lemuria. At a prearranged date, we'll all assemble at Mount Shasta and go through the warp that are maintained by the resident Lemurians there, and go to the beautiful continent which is now existent on some other realm or universe, or multiverse through a wormhole or something scientific, like wormholes and multiverses and interdimensional warps and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and then we'll all be safe, and everybody will be safe.
I believe that.
Yeah, thank God someone does. I don't. Anyway, no, seriously, ladies and gentlemen, the only escape we've got ultimately is heaven, and so we've got to make sure that we're worthy of that escape when the time comes. But if we make it to heaven, well, then this world and its nonsense is the closest to hell we'll ever come. Even if we go to purgatory, which God forbid. But if we go to hell, this is the closest to heaven.
All right. And with that,
you have a question for me? Is that it? Is that what you're trying to lead up?
What is it if it's Monday?
If it's Monday, it's not fun day. It's off the menu.
But what about the soul you save?
It may very well indeed, be your own.
See you next time, guys.
God bless all. Take care. See you next week.